newly restored Union Academy, built in 1791 and named for the year that Vermont came in as the 14th state in the Union. This beautifully restored building is a real treasure for this area, and we like to come in and spend some time here on East Poultney Day. It's a lot of fun. We've brought a few things today. We're going to do some lessons. One of the things I want to point out to you is probably when the school was open, it would have had a black board, an actual board painted black, or there would have been black right on the wall that we would have used. We're going to replicate that with some blackboard when we do our lessons today. What do you want to start with? Lesson? We probably would have started the day with for each grade level with a gem of the day. A lot of memorization was done both on this. A lot of memorization was done at that time, a lot of oral work in here. For younger children, they might have started with politenesses to do or say, the kindest thing in the kindest way. There would have been different ones for all age levels for 8 grades.
So the class needs to repeat that.
Go ahead.
Go right ahead. So class, let's repeat today's gem. Politeness is to do or say the kindest things in the kindest way. Thank you very much.
So this school building was used from 1791 to 1895, and then the new school was built across the green, and that was used from 1895 to 1964, and that's also open today. A beautiful restored building that, make sure you stop in and see that one also. Some of the lessons that we've done during the day, there would have been eight grades in here for the teacher to take care of. So there were lots of ways that she could keep the children busy while she was working with all 8 grades, having only a small amount of blackboard space. On this particular one, we gave examples of math. Notice there are no signs. We also have flashcards over here with no signs. And the reason is, if you look up here, I could use this for 2nd, 3rd grade. This could be either plus or minus. By the time we got to 4th grade, I could put a times, tell them to use a times sign. We could use a subtraction sign if you made sure that the top number was the larger one. So the teacher could use this without having to change the board 8 times. We have some of the spelling lists. You would have gotten a lot of use out of that because the children who were doing seat work, once you've started your list, for instance, if this is 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, not only are you looking at the spelling, but by this level, we're doing syllables, accents. You can have them use them in a sentence, something that they could be writing on their little slate while the teacher's busy. Here's this one. These are kind of fun that we do with kids. These are geography out of an actual book, and there were not a lot of maps. So what they would do with these is relate some of your areas to something the kids were familiar with. For instance, Italy, they could have them draw the boot and tell them, that's what the shape of that was. I think they have France looking like a teapot. Each one has a Long Island, and some of that area are water animals. And those were printed out of a 1800s geography book. Not a lot of printed materials at the time that this school was first opened.
And then when we do start to get into some of the printed, and the fact that they used a lot of the slate boards to do their seat work at. And we've also gone and taken some of the books. So there's the Nature Reader series that came out in the late 1800s. And they're stories, but they're science related. And so it was kind of a science project at the same time as a reading. And so I have taken today and taken a copy out, and actually to do a small science project with you, we're going to talk about Mr. Worm and his family. So one day, I'm going to read the story, and then if you want, you can actually play with the worms and see how this all comes together. But one day, I saw a boy making a hole in the ground. and he dug out a worm. I said to the boy, "What can you tell me about worms?" The boy said, "Worms are long, soft things, alike at both ends, and if you cut one in two, each end goes off and makes a whole new worm. They have no heads and no feet and no feelings, and are no good but for fish bait." That boy thought he knew all about worms, but really he knew very little about them. All that he told me was wrong. Worms belong to a great class of ringed or jointed animals. These creatures have bodies made in rings or joints. Let us take a careful look at our humble friend, the earthworm. He is long, round, soft, dark, slimy thing. And you say he is alike at both ends? Is he? Let us see. His body is made from 100 to 200 rings. And these rings are smaller toward the two ends of the body, which are the head and the tail. Each ring has on it tiny hooks, too small for you to see. And these hooks take the place of the jointed feet that his cousins have. The feet on a caterpillar will show you about how the hooks would look if you could see them. By these hooks, the worm moves along, and he digs his way in the ground. Mr. Worm can hold so fast to his den or his hole that you have hard work to pull him out. Have you seen Mr. Robin brace his feet and tug with all his might when he pulls out a worm? The worm is holding fast by his hooks. You see, the hooks are Mr. Worm's feet. Let us now look for his head. You have 5 senses. You can hear, see, feel, smell, and taste. The worm can feel and taste. Some think he can smell some things he cannot see or hear. Why do we say he has a head if he has no eyes, no ears, and no nose? We say he has a head because he has a mouth and a brain. His mouth has 2 lips. The upper lip is larger than the under, and he has no teeth. In the back of his head, not far from his mouth, is his brain or his nerve center. The worm is the only jointed animal that has red blood. Mr. Worm is dark colored because his body is full of the earth, which he swallows. If you keep him out of the earth for a while, his skin will get pale and clear. Then you can see the red blood run in the 2 long veins. He needs fresh air to keep his blood pure. He dies very soon if he's shut up in a closed box. So then you would take the class, and I did bring worms, right? And so with the class, we would have our science project, and we would look at the worm and see him wiggle, feel his little ribs, and so forth. And as the stories go on, there are more stories about Mr. Worm, what he really eats, how the stuff goes on. So the storybooks and the science kind of went together with this, and it made everything possible for that. A couple of other ones where we had, and I've brought some examples today and passed them out, was a little higher grades in regards to reading, again, having your words, and then working into grammar and so forth. In the one about Alaska, you're welcome to take these and go with it, but it says to copy the words in the story that have capital letters, which is instructing them that belong, that Alaska, the United States, etc. are in there. And then adding suffixes and taking suffixes off and going through all those processes. So as a teacher could work with, give each booklet with different grade levels. So this would be your study time, a quiet time while someone's is coming up and doing recitation. And they would recite and do spelling and so forth. And so the teacher would have to keep 8 grades going all day long, besides recess and lunch and so forth. So just an overview of what the day was like for the teacher in the one-room schools today, a few lessons along those lines. Any questions that you guys might have?
No, you did a great job.
Okay. And
Does
yes,
that remind you of the little school you went to? In a sense?
I didn't go to one school.
Oh, your
My
kids
kids did.
did.
It
oh,
was the last one that was closed in the state of Vermont, I believe. It was in Baltimore, Vermont.
in Baltimore, Vermont.
I think it was the last one that closed when no child left behind law, because they couldn't afford to keep it open.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids got farmed out. And I don't remember how many kids there was there. I mean, it was just grade school, it wasn't high school.
Right,
but it
so
was-
most of these, this was like 1st to 8th grade, and then when the new school was built, that one had 4 rooms over there, correct? So then you had a few, more teachers over there as things started to consolidate as we go through.
Yes. South School in Fairhaven, I don't know if you know, it's now the Eagles Club. It's a similar pattern. That one was built in 1870, South School, rather like your school across the way. And so they had gone from a 1-room to a 4-room, which I went to through 8th grade. So we had 2 grades in each room. Yeah. So, but in West Haven School, do you know West Haven?
They have an elementary now, right?
They did have an elementary for a long time, but it was K through 6 when I went up one day a week as a school nurse. And there were maybe 35 kids in total for the whole school. But in those schools, the older kids really helped the little kids.
Correct,
And you would call on them to,
correct.
yeah. And the town people came forward to help, like there was a lady for Jim in the winter. She had all kinds of ski equipment for cross country. So she would come over, I think twice a week and do that. So people jumped in and added to the
Correct.
curriculum.
Yep. And we brought curriculum things today as well.
And that building and the one you're talking about are more like the Victorian era, 1895, the whole style of architecture changed.
Yep. And South School went from 1870 to 61. Because I was in the last 8th grade class that,
This one was 64.
yeah. But it's kind of a similar
Come
pattern.
on in, come on in, welcome to class today.
And that's just close to keep the light.
Yeah, just shut the door.
Don't shut it all the way.
Don't shut it all the way.
So the people
Come
know.
on in.
We're going to move on.
You go on,
Thank you very much.
you've earned your recess time.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You've earned your recess
That was
time.
great fun.
Nice presentation.
I'm the first kid in South East line that's going to go home and
Good morning, class.
Good morning.
Okay,
Good to see some young people here.
that's right. So Mr. Prouty is going to talk to you about your gem of the day.
We would have started, there would have been 8 grades in here, so we would have started with a gem of the day that was compatible with each level. And the one we use a lot for the littler kids is politeness is to do or say the kindest thing in the kindest way. And that would have been someplace so that you would have been memorizing that all week, and probably by Friday, you've been asked to stand up here and tell it to the class. So we'll do this together. Are you ready?
Politeness is to do or say the kindest thing the kindest way.
And you're not getting the smiles. You should have seen the smiles that you're getting. One of the other things that we have just showed that they go back over here. Geography. One of the things that we found very interesting, and this is in an old geography book. It was hard to have lots of maps, so in the geography book, what they did was they took something that you're already familiar with and related it to the shape of the actual country or state or whatever. And some of those are pretty clever. There would not have been a lot of wall maps, so that would have been your geography.
This is so cute.
That is so cute. I've never seen that.
Some clever ones.
Never thought about Virginia as a sleeping camel.
So you had
Now you will.
You had to be creative back then.
Why is he racing?
So cute. These are so cute.
Yes.
Okay, Adriatic Sea one too.
And then after, they would cover geography, they would cover arithmetic, they'd go ahead and.
Don't forget, there's 8th grade, so you have something, every time a teacher has one grade up here, you have several subjects that she probably has you doing something on at your seat, on your slates. But we've replicated for you old blackboards. The actual term blackboard comes from board painted black, and sometimes it was painted right on the wall, or sometimes it was separate boards that were hung here, put together, and painted black, and that's where your term came from. So we've replicated here, and one of the things I like to show with math is that the teacher couldn't keep erasing that for 8 grades, and one of the things that, hi there, come on in. One of the things that is fun with the math is, notice there are no signs here. So if I start out with the youngest ones, notice these are real small facts up here, and we keep getting larger. But I can make these plus or minus, or by the time you get to 4th grade, they can be times signs. And then as you get into the older grades, these can be times signs, or plus, you keep getting larger. The only thing you have to remember if you're doing it this way is for, if you're going to do subtraction, you have to make sure the biggest number's on top. And then I've got four classes of spelling. If you get up to this, by the time you get to 6th, 7th grade, whatever, then one of the things you'd be practicing is they will probably have you one day put them in alphabetical order. Another day for practice, you might divide them into syllables and accent them. And another day you might, the teacher might have you write a sentence or something using them so that you're not continually having to erase that board for eight grades. Are you going to do your worms for that?
Well, no, I won't do the worm again, but maybe we will do one of our, we will continue, well, I'll tell them about the worm and I'll let them play with it. But there is the nature series, okay? This was a book series that came out in the late 1800s, and you're reading what you're learning about science, okay? And I have cut these out, or made a replica about Mr. Worm, okay? And so you can take that, but it also gets you out exploring science. It tells you a cute little story. I read Mr. Worm a few moments ago. We'll do it again in a little while. But there's like probably a total of 4 different stories, but it tells how the little boy finds the worm, and he says it's just good for fish bait. That's all it's good for. But their worms are really good for nature. And then, of course, we would bring in items. I have the worms with us if we were going to do the science project today. And they came up with a variety of things. So I do have these, and that you guys can take them home and talk about Mr. Worm and investigate and see if you know all of the little tales. The other is the reading activities and spelling books also, as you get into the older grades. There were activities, again, just as he put things on the board, you would do some of these on your chalkboard in regards to write these words without suffixes. So if I tell you that we have the word leaving, what is the suffix on leaving? ing, right? And so if you were to take ing off, how would you spell leave? All right, so if you on your chalkboard, so you have chalk right there. All right, so write leaving. Here's a piece of chalk, right? Leaving, and then take the suffix off of it and write the other word. How about ruined? We we have ruined, and so if we take the suffix off of ruined, we end up with ruin. So did we have to change any letters?
No.
Not in ruin, right? But did we have to change any letters in leave?
Mm-hmm.
We did, right? So this is practice, okay? And this is what they would do, constantly practice on their boards and so forth as we went through. So we have a variety of examples of what they would do throughout the day. Their day typically was from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. They would have a lunch recess, lunch time, and they would most likely have 2 breaks in the day as well.
Okay. That's
Okay.
a long day.
It was a long day.
Yeah.
It was a long day. And the older kids would help the younger kids and as they went through the day. So this was, this building itself was open from 1791 to 1895. And then the new school was built across the green.
Okay. Why did they build a new school?
Well, here we have 1 room.
Yeah.
Over there we have 4 rooms.
Okay. Did they continue to use this room too, or no?
No.
Okay.
No, they did not. So, Mr. Barrett.
One of the things that you would do with a lot of memorization is certain ways to help you remember things that weren't always easy. This one's always a fun one, and even as a kid, I learned this. But do you always have trouble, like with everyone thinking, let me see, does this one have 31 days? Does this one have 30? This was a poem the kids all learned. And without looking at it, I can still remember 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31 except the second month alone. To it were 28 assigned till leap year makes it 29. So you would have kept practicing that, and then when you came to the month, let me see how many, is this 30 or 31? You just remembered the poem that you had learned to help you remember that fact.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Joining us at East Poultney Day today. And our theme this year is Lakes, Mountains, and Summer. We have 2 representatives, board trustees from the Lake St. Catherine Association. First, Frank is going to talk about some memories on the lake that he had growing up. And then Jeremy is going to talk about all the work the organization is doing to keep the lake beautiful. And then after that, our own Ennis will be talking about the celebrities that came to the lake over time. So please put your hands together for Frank.
Hi, I live on Little Lake in Wells. My parents, when they were, my grandparents actually, met on the lake. There was an old hotel called the Lake St. Catherine House down the far end of the lake. My grandmother came up from Wells. She was working there. My grandfather came over from Middletown Springs, and he was working there. That's where they met. They got married and lived here in Poultney. So, my mother went down to Jersey for a job, and she was working with a couple that had a place on Point Pleasant Beach. So with this, of course, she took the kids to the beach to watch them. And she met this other lady who was watching kids. And they said, would you like to go on a double date with myself, my boyfriend, and his brother? Well, that's how they got to be my father, my uncle, and my aunt. So, when I was born, my mother insisted on coming up. I was baptized in the Methodist Church in Poultney, all the way from New Jersey. So, and I've been coming up every year since, except for the time I was in the Navy. But other than that, it's been all the times up here. We come to, my grandparents lived on the road going back into the main part of Poultney. And I would spend summers there. And on other times we would come up to visit Wells. I had, you know, those families were back in the late 1800s. They had all kinds of kids. one of my grandmother's brothers had 18 kids with 2 wives. So I can't say anything bad about anybody that Wells and that end down. My grandfather was up here from Middletown Springs, so I can't say anything bad about anybody this end. So I can't talk. And the one thing I wanted to explain is that back in the early days I was here, everybody did not have a boat. So they would use what some of you may remember, the water wagon from Idlewild. That was whatever, we could use that. You go over to Idlewild, or sometimes if you call them, they would even come and pick you up at your camp, take you around the lake. That was back in probably the late 40s, early 50s. I know you guys aren't old enough to remember, but that was it. Since then, since so many people have boats, we have put up buoys around the area to mark off. Incidentally, I was also the teacher for the boat course that we have, one in Poultney and one in Wells, for people to come, usually their kids, but adults also, to come and get their certification so that you can drive the boat. So we have these buoys around marking where you should be able to take your boat if you want to speed. If you're too close to the land, you have to be 100 feet out. Okay? And if you go around and you'll see where the buoys are, there's some kind of a marker to tell some places where it's real low, like Sunken Island. Okay, so you can see the two ends of that. Both sides are deeper. So be careful if you take kids there to go to the Sunken Island to swim or whatever. The two ends of it are marked, so that would be where you'd want to stay, just for their safety, because we don't want anybody to get hurt or die in this. The other things are keeping 100 feet out from the shore, so that you don't make up too bad of a thing, stirring up the mud and everything for the people that are living there, because they don't want extra mud on front of them. Okay, that's what they're for. I've been here since, well, actually my wife and I spent their honeymoon up on the northern part of the lake with some people that my wife and my mother had gone to school with at TCA. So I've been here a long time, in and out, okay? Any questions? Jeremy?
Hey, thanks, Greg. Hey, everybody, how you doing today? Good. So thank you to the Poultney Historical Society for inviting us today to speak at East Poultney Day. We are very excited to hear that this year's theme was Lakes, Mountains, and Summer, and focuses on beautiful Lake St. Catherine. My name is Jeremy Jones. I'm one of 15 trustees for the Lake St. Catherine Association. And my family has been coming to the lake since the mid-50s, and I now live here year-round on Cones Point. So I'll tell you a little bit about the Lake St. Catherine Association. It's a not-for-profit group of volunteers formed on August 31st of 1953. So that means that in just a few weeks, it'll mark the Lake St. Catherine Association's 70th anniversary of being stewards of the lake. Our mission is the preservation, protection, and maintenance of Lake St. Catherine, and we manage and direct important programs and projects that help protect the lake. We raise funds through membership dues, contributions, donations, and we apply for grants. So, let's talk about beautiful Lake St. Catherine. I know I'm kind of far away from everybody. I'll move up a little bit. Oh, don't want to mess up the camera. That's a nice aerial view of the lake. If you guys want to stop by, I can show you some of these pictures at our booth after the speech here. So some of our priorities are water quality improvement. We work to prevent and control aquatic invasive species. As Frank started to speak about, we care a lot about lake and boating safety, the wildlife around the lake, and we organize events, volunteer organization around the lake, and we reach out to educate folks about lake issues. We also do a lot of grant writing to try to bring funds to Lake St. Catherine through environmental groups in the state. And we work closely with the state, the towns, and environmental groups on the preservation of Lake St. Catherine. So we'll start off with water quality. So one of the things that we do is water quality improvement projects, and we have a number of those. So I want to start off with talking about the watershed. So the watershed of Lake St. Catherine is represented, here, let me show you. Maybe hard to see for the folks in the back, but there's a dotted line, and you can see where all the mountains and the streams. So when it rains, or in the winter when the snow melts, the water runs into these streams and then ends up in Lake St. Catherine. So that's the watershed. So things that are happening way away from the lake can have a large impact on the lake. And you can see here's a satellite photo of Lake St. Catherine. And you can see all the way from Lily Pond down to Lake's End. So one of the projects that we work on works with individual property owners around the lake, and that's called Lakewise. So Lakewise is a program that works with the property owners to make sure that their properties are lake friendly. So that means water that from rainstorms hits folks' property and can run into the lake, and that can carry pollutants and sediments and phosphorus into the lake, which is what we're working to keep out of the lake. So with this project, we're working with Poultney Meadowy Natural Resources Conservation District. They're right over there. You can talk to them today as well, where all the plants are. And they help us, and we also work with Castleton University on this project. And what they do is they go make appointments with property owners, and they assess your property to let you know what you can do on your property to make it lake-wise and lake-friendly. So far on Lake St. Catherine, we have 26 award winners. We have multiple in the crowd today, which is great to see. Thank you for coming. And our long-term goal is to earn what's called the Gold Lakewise Award, which is for the entire lake. And that would mean that about 85 property owners, or 15% of our property owners, would earn that Lakewise Award. So we need about 85, we're at 26, so that's a long-term goal that we've had since this project started on the lake in 2019. We did learn a cool stat. The DEC was here in mid-July, and they did a Lakewise training for folks who were interested in doing these assessments around our area. And we found out that since 2004, when the project started, 81 assessments have been done on Lake St. Catherine, and that doesn't count this year, which was almost another 20. And that represents 10% of all the Lakewise assessments in the entire state. So we're definitely leading the way in this program. And I'm going to embarrass a few folks here who won Lakewise Awards, because I can see them in the crowd. But here are a couple pictures of what we do is, if your property wins the Lakewise Award, you get this nice plaque to display on your property, and that's to let folks know that you're a Lakewise Award-winning property, and hopefully they'll ask you about that, and it kind of spreads the word about the program. These are two great properties that just happen to be on Combs Point that did a great job this year. But we have 10 properties that won last year, and we're hoping some more will win this year after the assessments. So we also have a bigger water quality program called the Stormwater Master Plan. So this, the Lakewise program worked on the parcel level with individual property owners. The Stormwater Master Plan works on bigger projects that might include multiple properties or roadways or culverts. So it's more of the municipal level of the project. This took place in 2018 with Poultney Meadowy and Fitzgerald Environmental. They went around the lake and identified 50 sites on the lake that had stormwater issues, where stormwater was running into the lake carrying pollutants and sediments. So at that point, they had funding to have 6 projects designed, and 4 have been completed, and I can show you where those are if you want to stop by our booth. They range from being down at the Wells Lakeside Park to the boat launch to Fern Cliff, and many more are on the list. And we also earned a $50,000 in partnership with Poultney Meadowy, a $50,000 grant last year to design 10 to 12 more projects. So what we're going to do in September, on September 1st at the Wells Town Hall at 10 a.m., we're going to have a meeting, and we're going to present the top remaining projects, and we're going to have the community pick what they think are the best ones that we should design. And then once those are designed, we will then go out to the state, which has a new program to fund these projects, and we will apply for funding to try to get those actually implemented around the lake. So another thing that the Lake St. Catherine Association has been doing for 40 years is called the Lay Monitoring Program. So every year, on a weekly and bi-weekly basis between Memorial Day and Labor Day, we would go out and take water samples from the big lake and the little lake in the same spot. So we have over 40 years of data to show what our trends are, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So what is tested for is water clarity, so how clear the water is, phosphorus, chlorophyll, and a new thing that they've added in 2023 is caffeine. So do you think, anybody know why they would test for caffeine?
Leaky septic.
Leaky septics, that's right. So if there's caffeine in the water and that's rising, then we know that there's some leaky septics that could be contributing that to the lake. And there's also E. coli testing that happens at the state park. So here's a chart that the DEC sent us recently. Maybe hard to see for the folks in the back, but the chart here on the right shows our phosphorus levels since 2000. So you can see the trend line is down, which is great, which is what we want to see. The lower numbers are better. Because what phosphorus does, excessive phosphorus getting into the lake can promote excessive weed growth, and that's what we don't want. So you can see the DEC has said that our summer phosphorus is significantly improving, which is great to see. And our water clarity is stable to improving since 2000, which is great to see. And last year we had our best reading for water clarity since 1997, which is also great to see. So the work that everybody is doing around the lake is definitely making a difference, and we can see it in the data. So this is a really cool one. A couple of years ago we applied for a grant for what's called a watershed action plan. So this is a comprehensive 3-year study that we, Poultney Meadowy, Fitzgerald Environmental, Castleton University, we've got a whole bunch of folks that are really smart and know what they're doing to look at the lake. And they're going to assess shoreline conditions, roadway and culvert conditions, watershed tributary, forest and wetland conditions, our current in-lake conditions. And then we're going to see where the issues may be, and we'll design projects to mitigate those issues. And then once we have this long, comprehensive 10-year plan, we'll be able to apply for funding to take care of those issues around the lake. So that's a 3-year plan, and this was us on a very cold May 16th this year, where we started the field work. So that was the first day of field work on the lake. So that's all of us going around the lake. So another big thing that we do is aquatic invasive species prevention and control. So what are aquatic invasive species? And we call them AIS. So those are non-native plants or animals and other organisms whose introduction into the ecosystem can cause harm to the environment. And why are aquatic invasive species harmful? Aquatic invasive species are not native to the environment, and they are introduced and they do not have natural controls like animals, insects, bacteria, or fungus to keep them under control. This allows them to easily multiply and grow and get out of control. So these are some of the bad critters that we're working to keep out of Lake St. Catherine that are only a lake or two away from us. So I'm sure folks would notice at the lake, this is a native mussel. It's called the Eastern Ellipto. That mussel is good for the lake. It helps filter the water. It's good to see them. You might see the shells of them. That's because the muskrats have been eating them and leaving the shells. But you can see the little tiny zebra mussels that are on top. That's what they can do. They cling to everything. They're in Lake Bombazine, so they're just a lake away from us. Then we've got spiny water flea, water chestnut, Asian clams. Those are all just a lake or two away, and we know at the boat launch that boats travel from lake to lake, so that's how they invade other lakes. So what we do is we have a greeter program at the boat launch, and we have a great staff that works Fridays and the weekends, and we work every fishing tournament because that's when a lot of boats are coming that travel from lake to lake, and they inspect those boats to make sure that they don't have any aquatic invasive species on their trailer or on their boat that enter the lake. And if they do, they pull them off to make sure that they don't enter the lake. And we also inspect when they're leaving, because we do have a few aquatic invasive species in Lake St. Catherine. So we make sure that those aren't on their boat or trailer when they leave. So here's our greeters on duty. Nice group of young folks that work there. When you put your boat in, they'll greet you, and then you can see one of them there doing an inspection of the trailer. So one of the big things we do for aquatic invasive species control is milfoil. I'm sure everybody's familiar with milfoil. It's an aquatic invasive species that's not native to North America. It has no natural controls. It can reach the surface in up to 20 feet of water. It grows and spreads extremely quickly. It was introduced into Lake St. Catherine in the early 1970s. And it can really decrease native plants, lake penetration, habitat complexity. It's just really bad for the environment. So if you're not aware of what it looks like, that's what milfoil looks like on the right side. And then on the left side, that's a picture from Little Lake from a couple of years ago, and you can see how dense it is. So what we do for milfoil control is we have an education and outreach program where we work with property owners and lake users to make sure that they know how it spreads, and so they're educated to know, don't let it sit in the lake, get it out of the lake because it can spread. Even the tiniest little piece can seed a new plant. We work with volunteers to do cleanup. We have a cleanup day that we promote every year, and then we also ask property owners, and I talked to a few of you, I don't know if you're in the crowd right now, about how much work you put in on your own property to pull milfoil out, which is great. That if everybody's doing that, it makes a big difference lake-wide. You might have seen them working in the North Bay or in Oxbow or in Horseshoe or south of the bridge. Where they're working right now, our DASH team, which stands for Diver Assisted Suction Harvesting. They're a scuba crew that goes down and hand pulls the milfoil from the lake bed, and then they have a suction tube where they place the plant into the suction tube, and it heads up onto the top of the boat where they remove it from the lake. We also do spot treatments with herbicide. We did not do that this year. And all of the water quality improvement projects that we talked about earlier, they also help because they're limiting phosphorus from getting into the lake, which can cause excessive plant growth. So here's our dive team. You might see them on the boat. They've got a little banner that says they're the Diver Assisted Suction Harvesting Crew. That's Owen and Beck. They do a great job for us and have for many years on the lake. And here's a little video showing what they do. Some people, when they hear diver assisted suction harvesting, they think they're actually suctioning the bottom, and that's not what happens. They hand pull the plant and then have a suction tube where they place that and it goes up to the boat. So they don't actually vacuum the bottom of the lake. It's all hand pulling and placing it into the collection tube. So Frank talked a little bit about lake safety. So Frank teaches our 2 boating classes every year. And this year we had 16 new licensed boaters. So that's about our average every year, about 15 to 20. So every year Frank does 2 classes, and you have to have your boating license if you were born before January 1st, 1974. Yep. So even that includes adults. It's not just kids. You have to be, if you're, yep. So after 74, yes. After January, if you were born in 73, you're okay. Or before. So as Frank talked about, we provide and maintain the markers and buoys, and we have a lot of good folks around the lake who actually help them get them in and out every spring and summer. We call them the buoy buddies. And the lake is patrolled by our Fish and Wildlife Game Warden, Justin Turner. He's been able to be at the lake much more often this year, and you might have seen him around the lake. He's a great guy. He cares a lot about lake safety. So he's doing safety checks and He's also providing the Lake St. Catherine Association and the lake community with updates. He's provided us 4 updates this year. He talks about what his patrols have been doing over the past couple of weeks with those updates, and he also tells us the enforcement issues that he's dealt with. So a lot of it is people speeding through no wake zones. So that's 5 miles an hour, like Frank said, 200 feet from shore. No spotter on the boat. That was another one that he's got a lot. So if you're water skiing or on jet ski and you're towing somebody, you need to have somebody over the age of 12 that is observing the person that is being towed. There was a boating while intoxicated situation this year that he took care of. So he's out there and keeping us all safe on the lake, and he's doing a great job. And this was from a couple years ago. The folks in the channel were pretty upset about some speeding in there. It's a 5 mile an hour no wake zone. So we talked to Justin. He said, "Hey, let's have a meet and greet. I'll come over and I'll talk to everybody." And he was great he answered every question that day. And that's a new marker buoy that you might see around the lake right there. Our previous buoys were starting to age out. So we've got Mike, who's on our board. He came up with this design, and he actually fabricated these and has been placing them around the lake, and they've been great. So let's talk about wildlife. So I know everybody's really excited about, I'm sure if you're involved with Lake St. Catherine, you've seen the eagles, the loons, and everybody loves going fishing. So we'll talk about those 3, even though it's like Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom out there sometimes with all the plants, or all the animals that you see and all the critters. So here's some pictures. I don't see Karen here, but Karen Belser, she's a photographer on the lake, and she takes beautiful photos. If you haven't seen them, check them out on Facebook. But that's an eagle from a few years ago. That's a loon, and then that's a crappie I caught last year. Good size crappie. So the eagles, we have a nesting pair of eagles that for several years have been producing eaglets. So they didn't have them last year, but they did this year. They have 3 eaglets. You might have seen them or heard them, depending on where you live. They're very loud this year. They need a lot of attention, apparently. But it's great to see. This eagle pair has had this nest for several years, and they keep having babies, which is great to see. So here, again, pictures from Karen. These are what the baby eagles look like. You can see they don't have the white head. It'll be 3 years before they get the white head. And they actually look physically bigger than the adult eagles because their feathers are poofier at this moment, so they actually look bigger. But all 3 of them are hanging out in the tree with mom and dad. So the loons. So I'm sure if you've been on the lake, you're probably aware that we've been experiencing a huge increase in seeing loons around the lake, both mature and what Eric Hansen, who's a loon biologist for Vermont Center for Eco Studies, calls a sub-adult. I'll show you some pictures of those in a second. So what's really exciting is a pair of loons were observed in the channel this year, and they were doing nesting activities, so they looked like they were trying to make a nest. They have a certain way that they act when they do that. So Eric Hansen from Vermont Center for Eco Studies ran down here, brought a bunch of buoys. We're ready to go. We went out there with Dawn Smith from the channel, who it was near her place, and she had observed it. And we found out that it wasn't very successful for their first nest making. So while that was disappointing, Sue is keeping those special buoys, and we'll be able to use them next year. Because what Eric's going to do is he's going to make a floating loon platform for us. So now that we know that these loons have selected Lake St. Catherine and they want to nest here, what we're going to do is make it so that they can make it as easy as possible for them. We're going to make this floating nest for them. Hopefully they will see it and use it next year, because these loons, based on what Eric believes, is that they will be back. They've selected Lake St. Catherine for breeding, so we hope to see them next year, and we're going to give them the best shot they can. I'm sure everybody would love to see little baby loon chicks on the lake. So that's an adult loon up on the top, and that's what Eric calls a sub-adult loon. So you might have seen both of these. I've seen both of these on the lake this year, multiples hanging out on the lake. And that's also what the loons look like similar to that coloring in the winter. When they leave the lake and they head for the ocean, they'll lose their black and white and they'll turn gray, and then they'll come back in April after they winter in the ocean. Yep, so I talked about that. So two loon conservation things we want to talk about. So these are the nesting platform, or not the nesting platforms, the signs to indicate that there's a loon nest nearby, so that we hope you'll be seeing those in the lake next year. And then this was just installed last week. This is a collection tube right here that was installed at the boat launch that our greeters are going to point out to all the anglers and people that are launching their boats. The idea of that is to collect all of the old lead tackle and old line that fishermen might have in their tackle box. Lead is deadly to loons. Even the smallest little tiny buckshot will kill them. So we're working to collect all those and get those out of old tackle boxes so they're no longer used anymore. So I thought this would be cool because I know folks really like the loons. They have 4 different calls, so let's see if this will work here, if I can get them to play. So that's a familiar one, that's called the yodel. And that's typically given when the loon feels threatened or territorial. Okay, and this next one's called the whale. So it just makes you smile, doesn't it? I can hear it in the crowd when you hear the noise. So that's usually used for long-distance communication between loons. This one's called the tremolo. This one's also called the crazy laugh. This call is usually a response to perceived threats, including other loons, humans, or predators such as eagles. And this one is called the hoot. And that's just a short call for short-range communication between members of a loon family. So really exciting with the eagles and the loons. We're just keeping our fingers crossed for next year for those baby chicks. So let's talk about fish. VT Fish and Wildlife, they yearly stock the lake with rainbows and browns. So about 1,000 rainbows and about 3,000 browns every year. Other fish include lake trout, pike perch, small and largemouth bass, rock bass, black crappie, sunnies, and there's many others. Lake St. Catherine is typically one of the top 3 lakes in Vermont for scheduled fishing tournaments. We keep track of those because of the greeter program. So we constantly keep track of those, and we're consistently 1 or 2 or 3. Champlain is the best, or has the most. We are constantly reaching out to Fish and Wildlife to discuss working together on mutually beneficial initiatives for the lake and for fish. Here's some pictures of the fish you might see in the lake. These are great illustrations that are from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. So these are some of the fish that are in the lake. So you can see here's all the trout. There's some large and smallmouth bass, perch, some sunnies, and a pike. And finally, a lot of the things that we do are outreach, so events like this to talk to folks. So here's a picture of us working on Green Up Day. That's the first Saturday in May. We organize folks around the lake and in Wells and Poultney to pick up garbage around the streets and the roads. We do events like our annual meeting. This picture was from the Town to Trails open house. That was in June. We're happy to be invited to that and speak to folks. And we really want to talk about this great event that's called Libraries Love Lakes. We had a great event last year. Gina from the Wells Village Library approached us about a program called Libraries Love Lakes. So we applied for a grant. We got a $9,000 grant last year to put on a great program at the Wells Lakeside Park on Little Lake. We had 9 presenters. We gave boat rides to kids. She was able to buy a whole bunch of materials to make little packages of educational lake stuff for kids and their families. And it also helped build a new section of the library, the Wells Village Library, called the Lake St. Catherine Collection. So we're really proud of earning that and working with Gina on that. That was so successful that we applied for another grant this year, and we got that one. That one's for $20,000. And what that project will do is it'll help expand the library with lake-related material. And that's a picture of Gina at the event from last year. And this year, instead of just one event, we're going to have 4 events, one for each themed season. So we'll have a winter, a spring, summer, and a fall. The big event we're hoping will be in the summer, and it'll be at the state park. So kids can come in, go swimming, have a great day, learn a whole bunch about the lake. And then we're also have funds to create an interactive watershed model of the lake. So it'll be this big table that will have the contours of the lake and the mountains, and we'll be able to actually fill it with water and show how the watershed works and how things flow down into the lake. So that's going to be great. Gina has a great idea for working with local kids from both towns to create a mascot for Lake St. Catherine. So she's going to have a little contest with that and hopefully work with maybe Castleton Theater Department to create a mascot. So that's underway, and it'll also, like I said, help expand the library. And we do like to have fun too. So here's a couple of pictures from the boat parade every 4th of July. So this was a great one, eagle themed. This family just had a brand new baby, and they dressed her up as an eagle and made the boat look like an eagle nest. So that was pretty cool. This one was 5 generations. So there was 5 generations of folks on that boat for Lake St. Catherine. Yeah, Rich.
Jeremy, let me. Oops.
I just want to point out on that picture, if you've seen it, the boat with the 5 generations is my next door neighbor, and they borrowed our flamingo and dressed it up as a stork. And if you look at the woman in the front, you'll see that the 5th generation is in utero. There are 3 pregnant women about to create the 5th generation, 2 of which have now come to life. So that was the whole theme. People said, "Oh, it's funny there's a man dressed up in a diaper," but basically the whole theme was that it traces back, and now that family is reaching their 5th generation.
Cool, thanks for that, Rich. And he ruined my joke about the guy with wearing the diaper, because that was pretty funny, and a bonnet too. He was very funny. Yes.
I was near for the parade, and they didn't come near us at all. There were tons of chairs out. People was near the island, Vanderbilt side, and they just ran past it. And we were just left. We couldn't see anything.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I'll talk to you after. We'll talk about it. Oh, and here are a few more. This one was great too. And I see somebody who was dressed up as an alien, and the unidentified floating object. That was a cool award-winning float from this year. So, and I'll end it with thanking you for your attention today. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about the lake and the work that we do, and the work that we can all do to help preserve and protect Lake St. Catherine. And if you want to learn more, you can visit us at our booth over here. We'll be here till 3, weather permitting. And you can also learn a lot more. We've got our website, which is lakestcatherine.org, which is constantly updated with information, as is our Facebook page, facebook.com/Lake St. Catherine Association. So thank you. Any questions?
Yeah, Jeremy, I was just wondering when the flood happened and the water raised like a foot, were there water quality issues afterwards?
So the state. Yep. The question was, did we have any issues because of the flooding with that huge storm that we had? We did notice a decrease in water quality or water clarity. So the state came in and took our. They actually did this statewide. They took, and there's a map online that you can see where they took all the lay monitoring data that I talked about for the lake during that time, and I think we had a meter decrease in water clarity because of the rise, and I'm sure everybody noticed that. There was a lot of stuff that came into the lake, and that's all what we were talking about, the storm water that ran through the watershed and ended up into the lake. So we've definitely been recovering since then, and we'll see more of that data when towards the end of the year we'll see our water clarity data, and we can see how it might have dipped during the year.
But other than clarity, there were no other E. coli or anything?
Yep, so they were testing constantly at the state park, and there were no issues, which was good. So we didn't have any issues like some other lakes had where they're experiencing bacteria and other things in the lake. Yeah, Rich.
Talk about membership at the patch.
Oh yeah, so thank you, Rich. So we wanted to talk about membership. So we're the majority of our funding for day-to-day stuff, besides the big projects where we can get funding from grants, is through membership and donations and contributions. So if you're interested in becoming a member, you can talk to us at our booth. And so the patch, this is a new idea. This is a member gift that we give to everybody who becomes a member for 2023. It's been very popular. I see a couple people. I got a hat over here. I got mine over here. We got another hat over here. And it's great to see. Thank you. So it's very popular, and a lake resident actually designed it for us, and we're going to do it again next year. It'll say 2024, but you get one of these patches when you become a member. Thanks, Reg. Yes?
You were talking about wildlife earlier. After the flood, when the water rose, somebody posted on Facebook a 6-foot-long snake on their dock. Are there poisonous snakes?
Yeah, so that was a water snake. Yeah, so there was a discussion about somebody saw a big scary snake and was concerned that it might have been poisonous, but and I think that was actually from my dock. I posted a very big snake on the dock.
Yes.
Yeah, so just to say that those are water snakes, and they're good for the environment, and they're not going to hurt you. They might be scary, but they won't hurt you. Even though my wife would disagree with that. There she is right there. Yes. Yeah, it was big. Yes, somebody over here?
The watershed management, like if you've got culverts bringing a bunch of them up, what can you actually physically do to eradicate them?
So if you've got a culvert that you think is causing trouble, please document it for us or let me know. We'll come take a look at it. And that could be something that we'll look at as part of the watershed action plan. We'll document it, we'll take a look at it, the engineer will look at it, and it could potentially be a project that we could get designed, fixed, and funded, and implemented. So yeah, if you have something, please follow up with me. Do I see another hand? Oh, am I running long?
You're doing fine. You're going to swing great question.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, awesome. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. Here you go, Ennis.
First, can you hear me?
Yes.
In the back? Good. Earlier, Frank told us about how his grandparents met at the Lake St. Catherine Hotel, the Lake House. We're going to do something like upstairs, downstairs. He was talking about downstairs. I'm going to be talking about upstairs. We're also going to play a little game that I'm calling American Memory, because the celebrities that stayed on Lake St. Catherine in the 1880s and 1890s have sort of faded from memory today. And I want to see how many of them are still current. It's a funny thing about celebrities. Some celebrities live on. I'm sure, 200 years from now, people will know who Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley were. They might not know a lot, but the names will click as famous people. Other celebrities, to quote Shakespeare, strut and fret their hour upon the stage and then are heard no more. So we're going to try to figure out which of these celebrities we still remember as a group. And, well, let's just start with, I'll pass these around. Does anybody recognize this gentleman? Yes. This is President of the United States, Grover Cleveland. And for at least the last 50 years, people who are interested in Poultney history have believed that Grover Cleveland stayed at the Lake St. Catherine house, that's at actually the Wells end of the lake, in August of 1887. My first plan for my talk today was to tell you about the president's visit. I thought, wouldn't this be interesting? What was going on in Washington? How did he get here? I might describe the luxurious Pullman car parked at the train station in Granville, or maybe Poultney. But I had trouble doing this. And I started searching in the Poultney Journal and the Granville Sentinel with digital technology today. And if you're smart about search terms, you can pretty well find out what's in there. And I searched for Cleveland's years as president and found absolutely nothing about a visit. I found news stories and political commentary, but not a whisper about a visit. Then I found in the Granville Sentinel for 1970 a little article that said that Cleveland was here on August 28th, 1887. And he signed the guest book at the lake house, where you put on the guest book where you live. He just put Washington, D.C. He's the president, everyone knows. So I read the Granville Sentinel and the Poultney Journal for the few weeks around that visit and found nothing. I did find that Grover Cleveland came through Vermont in June of that year, and it was a really big deal. He came from Bennington north in his Pullman car. There were large crowds at every station. When he reached St. Albans, the crowd was 1,500 people turned out to see him. Although many of the women wanted to see his wife. And I'm going to pass these around. So, many people wanted to see his wife, First Lady Frances Folsom Cleveland. She was the youngest, and still is, the youngest First Lady in U.S. history. She was 22 in 1887. They traveled through Vermont, they crossed Lake Champlain at Rouse's Point, and stayed at the Saranac Inn in the Adirondacks. I thought maybe they made it to Lake St. Catherine somehow, but I don't think so. And I read several biographies. I looked at the national papers at the National Archives, nothing, and I finally contacted the Grover Cleveland Museum in New Jersey, and they did an extensive search and found nothing. So I may be wrong, and I hope somebody comes up with something to prove me wrong, but I think maybe the president didn't visit us.
His loss.
That's right.
will I do next? Now we're going to play this game of who do you remember? And we'll try first comedian DeWolf Hopper. Does anybody heard of DeWolf Hopper? Oh, sorry. DeWolf Hopper. Does anyone have heard of DeWolf Hopper? Is that a yes? No.
Yeah, I love the Betsy.
You were going to get a prize. DeWolf Hopper was a comedian. He was in some 30 Broadway plays, and he was most famous for reciting the poem Casey at the Bat. And he claimed that he recited Casey at the Bat 10,000 times. And you can actually go on YouTube and find a clip of him, a record and a movie clip of him reciting Casey at the Bat from, I think it was 1912, 1913, something like that. It's not very good, but he still is on YouTube. We're all going to get the first part of this question right. How many of you have heard of the Vanderbilts? All right, I figured that would be everybody. Does anybody think they can straighten out which Vanderbilt is which Vanderbilt? The one that visited Lake St. Catherine was William K. Vanderbilt. Now, my first question to myself was he the richest man in the world when he was at Lake St. Catherine? Well,
At Lake St. Catherine?
yeah, when he came to Lake St. Catherine, was he the richest man in the world? His grandfather, Commodore Vanderbilt, was indeed the richest man in the world. We're talking Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk kind of money. So his grandfather was. And his father, who inherited the money and lived just a few years, was also the richest man in the world. But by the time our guy, William Kissam Vanderbilt, inherited, the fortune was split. And he had, if I have it right in my mind, he inherited only $55 million, which translates into current money as 1.7 billion. So he was not the richest man in the world. There is a connection to Vermont, another connection to Vermont. His sister was one of the founders, married a man named Webb, and founded Shelburne Farms, and their son married Electra Havermeyer and founded the Shelburne Museum. So there is a connection there. How about Lou Dockstader? Anybody here? He is the man who made 1 million people laugh, according to his publicity. I was very happy that I could find this picture of Lou Dockstader, because the other pictures of him that I could find, he was in blackface. He was a minstrel, and that was a kind of racist comedy at the end of the 19th century, into the 20th century. He also made fun of President Theodore Roosevelt, and there was an early movie, not a projected movie, but one of these movies that you look down and turn to crank, but I think it was 1904 or something, and which he imitated President Roosevelt, and it was so scandalous that the police in New York seized the movie and destroyed it. So I think it might be on YouTube if they hadn't destroyed it, but it's gone. You can hear Lou sing on YouTube. He has a very catchy song called "Everybody Works But Father." He just sits in the corner smoking his pipe, and everybody else in the family works.
Why and when was he at the lake?
But,
Why and when was he at the
you
lake?
know, I don't know the exact date on him. This is all 1890s, 1880s, 1890s. Some of the dates. A good source for this, if anybody is interested, you've probably seen this book. You can get it online now as a PDF. You don't need to buy it. And it has dates for some of these visits and mentions President Cleveland's visit that I doubt. But it's worth finding. I bet I got another one here that most people have heard of. Only just ring a bell. You don't have to be able to say a lot. How about Lillian Russell? Lillian Russell. A few hands for Lillian Russell. She was the beauty queen and actress of the 1880s into the 1890s. Also, if you're interested in the scandals of celebrities, she still ranks up there. Her first marriage, she was pregnant when she got married. That one didn't last. Her second marriage turned out he was a bigamist, and he was arrested. Her third marriage was very brief, just a couple years, and she never divorced her fourth husband. But she spent most of her time with, well, here's another name for you. How many have heard of Diamond Jim Brady? That may top the Vanderbilts. I don't know. That was pretty good. Well, she spent most of her time with Diamond Jim. And yes, in Saratoga, exactly. It was said that Diamond Jim really liked to eat, but she could match him. And there is a movie of her, one of the earliest color movies from, I think, 1913. It's not very good, and it's just a little clip, but she clearly is a little overweight at that point. So, but beauty queen Lillian Russell. See how we do on this one. I tried this one on my son, and he didn't know it, so maybe it's a generational thing. Either as a thing or as a name, Delmonico. A few. Some people have said, you mean like pineapple? No, we're talking Delmonico's steak. We're talking Delmonico's restaurant, and we're talking Charles Delmonico, who was also at Lake St. Catherine. I'm not sure this is the right Charles Delmonico. There were two of them in the 1880s who managed Delmonico's restaurant in New York. One of them died in 1884 or so, and then the younger Delmonico took over. There has been a Delmonico's restaurant in New York since the 1830s. There was until very recently. It closed during COVID. And then there was some fight over the Delmonico name that you'd need to be a lawyer to understand. But Delmonico's is reopening next week in New York. I've looked it up. You can find their menu and make your reservations online. You might consider the steak for two, the porterhouse steak for two, which is $175. And we seem to be kind of, I didn't finish my other Delmonico story. I've got to tell you this story. Delmonico's its golden age was in the 1880s. And it was mostly a restaurant for gentlemen. Women were allowed to go to Delmonico's, but they needed to be accompanied by a man, a gentleman, certainly. And if they took a private room, the door needed to be kept open. But Delmonico, Charles Delmonico, whose picture is going around here, he came up with, he understood the gentleman in his restaurant very well. And his theory was that you never presented them with a check or a bill unless they called for it. So if you were a gentleman, you could go into Delmonico's night after night and eat your dinner and say, please put it on my tab. But some night you would come in and they would seat you. They'd say, so glad to see you. It's a nice evening out. Here's your table. And a waiter would never appear. And finally you might grab a waiter going by and give him your order, and the food would never appear. And then you'd grab the manager and complain, and he'd say, well, I'll go off to the kitchen and see what's wrong with your meal. And nothing would ever happen. And then you'd finally figure it out that you'd been blacklisted at Delmonico's. And it was said that being blacklisted at Delmonico's was worse than being caught cheating at cards. How many have heard of Jay Gould? Jay Gould. Jay Gould, we have really gone downhill. He is one of the villains of U.S. history. He caused almost single-handedly the Depression of 1869. They called it the Panic of 1869. He tried to corner the market in gold, and then that crashed, and the stock market crashed, and there was unemployment and all sorts of problems. Interesting enough, I didn't know until I started my research for this that he is one of the most important people in Poultney history. Did you know that? No. He was the superintendent of the Rutland and Washington Railroad, which is our railroad turned into the D&H. And he got his position as the railroad was in financial trouble. He bought up the railroad stock for 10 cents on a dollar. And that was his career. He started here, and railroads just grew and gobbled each other up, and he ended up, he was wealthier than the Vanderbilts. Jay Gould, if you look him up online, you look up this photograph online, somebody has taken this photograph and drawn devil horns on it. You can find that online as well. I have saved the best until last. I was so charmed by this discovery. How many of you have heard of Elsie Leslie? Okay, all right. Well, Elsie Leslie, how many of you have heard of Shirley Temple? Everybody. Well, Elsie Leslie was Shirley Temple years before. She was a child star appearing on Broadway in a play called Little Lord Fauntleroy, in which she played a boy part. Little Lord Fauntleroy, you wouldn't want to be called Little Lord Fauntleroy today. Little Lord Fauntleroy has turned into something of an insult. An overly polite kid who's wearing too fancy clothes. But at the time, people were absolutely charmed by Little Lord Fauntleroy. In fact, I kind of think of Elsie Leslie as the Harry Potter of the day, and that's not an exaggeration. She was incredibly well known. Now, she stayed on Lake St. Catherine. If you go by Ferncliff to the end of the road there, that is the house that she was on, kind of opposite the state park. And she loved her summers here. I have quotes for this one. I don't want to rely on my memory. And get the cool. Elsie Leslie was kind of beloved by the Poultney Journal. They followed her around the world. There would be articles on her. And here's from the Poultney Journal. I think this is 1888. She was 9 years old. She is pretty, with beautiful golden hair, gentle in disposition, and childlike in all her ways. Praise and presents do not seem to turn her head, to make her bold or presuming, or anything what a nice little girl of 10 years of age should be. And her letters have been published. She loved as a child to write letters to famous people and to other kids. She wrote letters to Helen Keller, who was a kid at the time, letters to Eleanor Roosevelt, and Eleanor Roosevelt's maiden name was Roosevelt. And she made journal entries like, "I do so love it here," she wrote in 1889, "and more every time I come back. There are plenty of children to play with, and there is fishing and tree climbing." The New York Tribune wrote an article about her while she was staying on Lake St. Catherine and listed her pets. She had a puppy named Toddkins, 2 ponies, Huckleberry Finn and Rats, and a rowboat called the Elsie. Sometimes she wore a boy's suit because it was easier to play in. But if she went out, she dressed in her own girly style frocks. One of my favorite stories is the cowcatcher story. In 1890, a calf was killed by a train coming into Poultney. And she was very upset by it. And she went to the station master in Poultney and said, how could this happen, that a calf was killed by a train? And he explained to her that the conductor, the engineer of the train, was very, very sorry for what had happened. And the cowcatcher was defective. Now, cowcatcher is a kind of a euphemism. You may think of a cowcatcher as, it comes along and gently moves the cow to the side, it catches it, and if it's working properly. And of course what a cowcatcher does is just push debris off the track, and any animal that would be there would be quickly killed. But Elsie was still concerned, and she wrote to the president of the New York Central Railroad, and who she considered a dear friend. And she told the president of the New York Central to make sure that his engineers were careful and to make sure that the cowcatchers were working properly. And he wrote back. I've read the letter. It's a sweet letter, and he tells her, how sorry he is about everything. And then he reminds her that actually the train that comes through Poultney is not the New York Central, it's the D&H. I think people in town genuinely knew her and liked her. When her stage production of The Prince and the Pauper was traveling around, when it came to Rutland, a special train was commissioned, and 80 people from Poultney rode into Rutland to see her in the production. I've got another picture of her. She continued to act in boys' roles until she was old enough that it was obvious she was not a boy. And she stopped acting for a few years, and then she returned to the stage as a beautiful woman. She was less popular as an adult star. That, by the way, that photograph that's coming around is taken by a famous photographer, Otto Sarene, and it's really a fine portrait of her. I think her time at Lake St. Catherine ended with her marriage in 1901. That marriage did not go well, and she divorced that husband. And then in 1918, she married a Canadian-American businessman. And this is kind of the, he asked her, he said, what could I do, what would you like to do that would make you happy? And she said, why, I'd like to travel. And he said, how can that be? You've been everywhere in the world. And she said, yes, I've been all around the world, but I was sleeping during the day and acting at night, and I never saw anything. And I think they spent years traveling. I'm sure there are so many other famous people we could talk about, but that's a start. I intend to do more research on this, and I'm fascinated by it. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Or? Yes. I don't know. The answer to this is that the guest book for the lake house existed in 1970, and there's no doubt that it existed. And a very fine local historian, Morris Rosen, studied it carefully. But I can't find it. I've been calling around. I've been hoping somebody will come up today and say, you know, I know where it is. Why don't you know where it is? Because that would be the answer. If we had the guest book, we would probably find so many more people we could be here all afternoon.
So you keep referring to the lake house. Where was the lake house?
Southern end of the big lake. It was also called the Lake St. Catherine Hotel or the Lake St. Catherine House.
Was it on the channel or on the main part of the lake?
Main part of the lake, looking north, and you can still sort of see foundation remains of it, I believe.
East or west side? East or west?
Just at the very south of the lake.
Forest house?
We will look it up when we're done here. Yes.
Any rumors or truth of current famous people who either own or...
You're asking the wrong person. I'm stuck in the past. Yes.
Back when Johnny Carson was doing his show, and one night Joan Rivers was covering for him, and in her discussion with, I don't remember who it was, she said that she spent her summers at Camp Kenny Cadet on Lake St. Catherine.
Joan Rivers.
Yes.
Wow.
She made jokes about it.
Any other names that people want to mention?
Now,
I'm the wrong person to ask.
I heard rumors Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck is here often. His mother had a place on Coast Point.
Oh, where?
He used to fly in.
Where CD on.
Thank you very much.